Hey, this is Notser, and this is a look at the early tiers of the German cruiser line. At tier 1, we have the Hermelin. Now, this isn't impressive. It uses the 128mm guns that are on the German destroyers, if you're familiar with that. But it's a gunboat that has been classified as a cruiser for gameplay purposes. It has basically no armor. It doesn't have the ability to fire AP. There is no premium consumables. There's just not a lot here. It's a way to introduce you to the game at tier 1, and you don't really get a good idea of how the Germans play. But we could talk about the German cruiser line in general. So the German cruiser line has been the game for a fairly long time. For a while, the Germans have been seen as a mediocre line. It just jack of all trades, not really a master of any one aspect of the game. You know, they had pretty good guns. They had pretty good torpedo systems, pretty good armor, pretty good AA, but nothing that really says, wow, that really stands out. Over time, Wargaming have really addressed some of those core issues. The HE used to be god-awful. It used to be never, ever, ever fire HE. It was that bad. And then they improved it, and then people never adopted actually using HE. Now we're in a state where you should use HE in an obvious angle target. You should use AP when you can obviously do damage with AP, and you should have a lot of success with that. At tier 2, we have the Dresden. Now we're getting into ships that are actually cool. We get into the normal game. It has 12 105mm guns. It looks similar to a St. Louis, and it's sort of a mini St. Louis. It has great maneuverability, pretty fair armor, honestly. What can you expect at this tier, though? I don't really expect a lot. You should be able to outplay players just by your knowledge of the game. Apologies for this footage. It is in 1440p, so it has to sort of be downscaled. However, you still get the idea. Try to move forward. If the target is side-on, fire AP. If I've got a target where it's going to overpin all the time, then switch to HE. And as far as the build is concerned, the Germans are a line that really doesn't need expert marksmen. I would pick up a drone rush first on every single German cruiser. You will benefit from it, and yes, you will take damage. Spoiler. And then as you get up, you'll get access to hydroacoustic, defensive fire, all those tools that you really enjoy. I get Superintendent for that. I do prefer to pick up Demolition Expert first, but I wouldn't be critical of you if you were one of those players that's like, well, I think Superintendent's better, or I think basic firing training and advanced firing training is better. I want to go an anti-air build. That's completely fine. But in general, on all my cruisers, not just German, I always pick up Demolition Expert, because to me, the primary function of the cruiser is doing damage, and lighting targets up is a very important way to do damage. At Premium Tier 2, we've got the Emden. Now, this was given out. What's unique about it? Well, it's got sort of a fake smokestack to make it look like a British cruiser. It is a little less impressive, honestly. It's got 10 105mm guns compared to the Dresden, who has 12. Its armor, what armor, right? It's got more armor near the command tower, command position. But it's got a nice white paint, it's got a little royal crest, and it's got that fake smokestack to try and confuse the British. Oh, it's a friendly. Now, again, same sort of build idea. I really believe that Demolition Expert is definitely something you should look to do in your Germans, especially now that the changes occurred. We're still not to the point where you will see the HE penetration improvement. That has not been introduced in the game yet. That will be at tier 4 for the Karl, but for now, we've got just brute force. It's a premium ship, so you can bring down your really high-end German cruiser commander. You use it against the enemy, of course. And again, expert marksman, not really. Another skill you might do is jack of all trades, but you can see there's not really a lot of abilities, consumables to use, and it's just like, well, it doesn't really matter, so. But it's got good rate of fire, it's got a lot of guns, It is pretty thin, so you can maneuver out of the way if you need to. Destroyers really don't like you. They don't really like anyone with this amount of guns, like the St. Louis or whatever. So yeah, that's a part of the game, and the Emden was... I think I've got like 6 or 7 of them over the course of the game. It's just a small free ship, pretty much. At Tier 3, we've got the Kolberg, and the Kolberg continues the identity of the Dresden. 12 105mm guns, absolutely no AA. This is World War I era, an aircraft in the sky, ridiculous, yeah. Don't expect much from it. Armor, again, is subpar, but there's not a lot of large caliber being fired, and it's maneuverable. You can now have access to the second module slot, and I pick up the lower chance of flooded fire. I just believe strongly in that. You still don't have access to defensive fire or hydroacoustic, so just consider that. But these guns feel really good. Maneuverability feels great. You can sort of juke torpedoes. I'm going to try and juke with the Samson before he drops some luggage on me. And obviously, you just want to keep the fire up. Low tier is just all about using your knowledge of the game against players that just are maybe not as knowledgeable with it. There's really no trick down here that you should focus on. This is the last tier, though, that will not benefit from the HE penetration change, so keep that in mind. You still have 1/6 of your gun caliber as the calculation for the armor that you can do damage to. So just keep that in mind. There's really nothing else. It's got port and starboard guns, it has good maneuverability, it has no torpedo systems whatsoever. This is the last of the great old World War I ships. It's got that weird forward bow that kind of looks like I don't know, like an armored tank, sort of. And yeah, that's Tier 3. At Tier 4, we've got the Karlsruhe. The Karl, as I like to call it. This is starting to look like a German cruiser. 8 150mm guns, torpedo systems, a little bit of AA. We're getting the speed up. Its armor's going up, but again, not crazy at this point. Of course, what cruiser? It has crazy armor, right? Yeah, I can't even say that with a straight face. And we're getting hydroacoustic or defensive fire, depending on what you end up running into a lot. The torpedoes, the guns, we have now reached the HE improvement that is gun caliber divided by 4. And that is calculating when the shell will be able to do damage or shatter on the side. Now, 150, in the past, people might have said, oh, pick up an inertia fuse high explosive. You honestly shouldn't do that at Tier 4, first of all. But now you don't need to, because you have access to HE's new penetration mechanic for the Germans. So I really prefer firing HE whenever I'm engaging a target that could maneuver, or I need to light them on fire. And they have great angling where my AP is not going to be successful. If they are showing their side, then go hardcore on AP, because the Germans' AP is pretty effective when you're able to fire it. Now, I always like to aim sort of at the top of the hull of battleships. I don't want it to go after the absolute ridiculous part. And of course, 150mm, you don't want to go for super thick armor, because you'll probably just shatter on the side. It's not going to be a large enough caliber for that, but top of the hull or the bow and the stern, when it's side on, you'll have a lot of success with your AP. Long ago, the car was a joke, not any longer. At Tier 5, we've got the Koenigsberg. The Koenigsberg is pretty interesting for a number of reasons. It's got 950mm guns, it's got the torpedo systems, of course, fair AA, it's got pretty good speed, pretty good maneuverability, but it also has access to 360-degree turret rotation in the rear. Now, you might say, well, that doesn't really sound like a really cool trait. Well, it is cool, because you can wiggle back and forth and have the guns always on target and useful whenever you need them. The Koenigsberg is actually pretty fun to play. It, again, 150mm guns. It has the HE divided by 4. So you don't need inertia fuse to have success whenever you're trying to attack the bow or stern of equal tier battleships, even higher tier. Overall, you really are starting to get the identity of the Germans, and In the old days, it used to be ridiculous. Advanced firing training, basic firing training, you used to just be 19 kilometers away from your target, doing damage, having a pretty good velocity. They're just crying because, oh, I can't keep up. This has access to an aircraft as well, so I would be very comfortable picking up Superintendent first over Demolition. But that doesn't mean it's like more or less relevant. It's all about the type of player you want to be. I like Demolition Expert on my cruiser, so I'm going to go that first. Superintendent is great for the support. Using Hydro, because the German trait is extended Hydro range, is great for your team, great for you, those guys in your smoke, or trying to get an aggressive stance against an enemy torpedo, if that's a possibility. Maybe looking around an island because you have the extended range. It is actually pretty effective platform. Now, some traits that you might notice at like tier 4 or 5, you might lose your steering and your propulsion more often than you would normally on other cruiser lines. You could swap out Expert Marksman. I wouldn't pick it up first, I would get Adrenaline Rush, but you could not even pick that up and get Last Stand on this ship. However, it doesn't really happen as much as I would expect, or you know, to justify Last Stand on it, not like a destroyer. So that was the early tier German cruisers. Next up, late tier, and I can't wait to show those off. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.